Oh, in essence, the law was published and gazetted on 21 October 2022. So it's quite a very new piece of legislation, or can I say a very new act of parliament. But generally speaking, it's an act that has come. This is just the latest development in terms of that law is concerned. But if we look back in terms of the developments and the historical aspects that led to the law coming into place, we start far back as 2013 when we adopted our constitution. So Section 210 of the Constitution made a provision that an Act of Parliament must provide for an effective independent mechanism for receiving and investigating complaints from members of the public against misconduct by members of the security services. So this is a provision that was there in the Constitution. And also, if we look at what the Constitution say in terms of constitutional obligations, because Section 210, what it did in essence was to make a constitutional obligation for the state to have an obligation to come up with this commission. So in terms of Section 324 of the Constitution, again, it makes a provision that all constitutional obligations must be performed diligently and without delay. So 3 years on after the Constitution, that is in 2016, as Veritas, we realized that there wasn't any traction in terms of coming up with an act that is envisaged in Section 210 of the Constitution. So as a result, Veritas had to make a constitutional application to obtain a ruling, or can I say a court order compelling government to start the processes that would lead to such an act. So this is what happened in 2016. We only obtained the judgment in 2020 after going to the Constitutional Court in 2016. So in 2020, that is when, this is now some 4.5 years later, and as a result, then government produced a bill. That is in 2020. Then a bill, the Independence Complaints Commission bill, was then introduced. Then it went through all the processes that any ordinary bill goes through in terms of the lawmaking process in Parliament, which culminated in the the latest development which I mentioned on the 21st of October 2022, when the as currently the setup is that if you have complaints against security services, naturally the processes that are there is that you are complaining, you are sending your complaint to the institution that you are complaining against. For instance, you are sending, if you have got a complaints against police officers, the complaints procedure is taken by the police themselves. So that in itself creates a problem. But maybe even before I even answer your question, I needed to explain who is the security services, because your listeners might be wondering who are the members of the security services that we are talking about. So in terms of the Constitution, the security services consist of the defense forces, that is where you have your Zimbabwe National Army. It also consists of the Zimbabwe Police Service. It also consists of the intelligence services, the Central Intelligence Department. It also consists of the Zimbabwe Prisons and Correctional Services, as well as any other security service that could have been established by an Act of Parliament. So this is the group of security service officers that we are talking about. And then you spoke about, is it a right direction in terms of combating impunity by the security services? I think it is, because we now have a platform where members of the public can interact with an independent institution that is not necessarily where officers report to. This is not the employer of the security service officers, but then they are answerable in terms of their conduct. Because now this commission is going to be investigating and making recommendations of a disciplinary nature against misconduct. And maybe the listeners might want to know how the Act defines misconduct. So misconduct that is going to be investigated in terms of this Act, it includes the following, but not necessarily limited to that. We are talking about issues that relates to, because these issues, as I read them out, you will notice that these are issues that have been a problem or a challenge in our community for quite a long time. And these issues we've seen them covered in reports where such issues happen and people don't know what to do, or they are not satisfied in terms of the mechanisms to deal with that. So, for instance, this commission will be making investigations in issues that relate to any death in custody of any member of a security service, or any death as a result of actions of any member of a security service, or injustices or unjustified discharge of any official firearm by any member of the security service. It also includes issues related to sexual offenses or sexual, that is rape by a member of a security service, whether the member is on or off duty. It also includes rape of any person while that person is in custody of a security service. It also covers issues that relates to torture or assault against any member of a security service in the execution of the member's duties. It also includes any other act or conduct, including violations of human rights, complained by any person or any of his or on behalf, being an act or conduct of any member of a security service in the discharge or purported discharge of the member's functions. So you see, it's quite broad. But also the act is very clear. It indicates that these acts that are listed in the act, then it's not limited to only those. So it's broad enough to cover any complaint that one can actually imagine that is ascribed to the conduct of security service members in the conduct of their duties. Indicated, this is a very new act of Parliament. It's a new law that came, that was signed into law and by the President and gazetted on the 21st of October, that is 21 October 2022. But generally the law has got a history. It is not just like in a vacuum in terms of how it came into operation. There's a constitutional provision in the 2013 Constitution, that is section 210, which is the provision that gives birth to this act. So section 210 gives an obligation, which is a constitutional obligation, for the state to come up with an act of Parliament which must make provisions for the creation of the Independent Complaints Commission that will deal with. As we speak now, maybe I need to indicate that legally speaking, this act became operational as soon as it was published. But for practical purposes, at the moment, I wouldn't say members of the public can interact with this law as yet, because it is not yet effective. Because this is an act that envisages the creation of a commission that has to be created first. After creation of the commission, then the secretariat is employed. Then the secretariat is part of, that's when you get your investigators that will then receive complaints and investigate into the complaints that the members of the public may do. So at the moment, maybe I may speak to what needs to happen for the act to be, for people to be able to interact with this new law. First and foremost, the Parliament's Committee on Standing Rules and Orders would have to conduct, would have to initiate the process of interviews. Because for this commission that is envisaged in the Act to be in place, there has to be a commission that is set up in terms of the provisions of this new Act. If you look at the provisions of the new Act in terms of how this commission comes, it's not very different from how other commissions are set up, like your Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, your Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. The setup process is quite a public process, where the Parliament Committee that I've mentioned, the Parliament on Standing Rules and Orders, would have to invite the public to nominate candidates for appointment to the Commission. So the Commission would have to be to consist of a chairperson, who is a person who is eligible to be appointed to be a judge of the High Court. Then other 4 commissioners of these other 4 commissioners, one must be a lawyer, and another must be a medical practitioner, and also one must be a psychologist, and another person who has got experience in the security in terms of security services. So that's how the commission should be set up. So once that commission is put in place, it will then sit and also then elect its secretary within its commission, because there will be a chairperson already. Then once it's set up, then it will be responsible then of employing the secretariat that would then deal with the issues on a day-to-day basis, just like any other commissions are structured. So in terms of appointment of the commission, interviews are conducted by the Parliamentary Committee on Standing Rules and Orders after invitation of nominations by the public. So the public participates in the nomination of the prospective commissioners. Then the Parliament conducts a public interview, just like all other interviews that we've seen in other commissions that are already in place. So after conducting interviews, the commission, the committee must prepare 2 sets, essentially two lists comprised of 7 nominees. One is for the chairperson. There has to be a list of not less than 7 people that is submitted to the president. Then the second list is for the other 4 commissioners. That also comprises of a list of nominees that are 7 or more. So after sending this list, then the president would then choose from that list to appoint the chairperson and these other 4 commissioners. So at the end of the day, the appointment is done by the president from the list that is submitted by Parliament. So in terms of issues relating to independence of this commission, the independence of the commission, my understanding is that this commission is just going to be operating in terms of any other commission, just like any the other commissions that we have already in terms of the Constitution, because this commission will also be a creature that is envisaged by the Constitution. And in terms of how these independent commissions act, the independence of the commissions that are created by the Constitution is guaranteed by the Constitution itself. In terms of the independence of, in any case, even if the name itself suggests that this commission is supposed to be an independent complaint mechanism. That's how even the Constitution puts it. This is supposed to be an independent complaints mechanism that is effective and independent. So the independence of the commission is emphasized by the Constitution itself. So interference with the commission would not be in terms of what the Constitution envisages. So independence, but in terms of whether it's going to work independently or not, we live to see that once it's established. But in terms of the law and the legal framework that guarantees its independence, that is actually guaranteed by the Constitution itself. So I think for me, before I answer the question, the listeners might need to know what Section 210 of the Constitution says. So I'll just read what it says for the benefit of your listeners. Section 210 of the Constitution creates what is called independent complaints mechanism. And it says, an Act of Parliament must provide an effective and independent mechanism for receiving and investigating complaints from members of the public about misconduct on the part of members of the security services and for remedying any harm caused by such misconduct. Yes. So now this Act, the Act then comes in to define what misconduct is, and I've explained what is covered under the definition of misconduct in the Act. It also indicates the functions of the Commission, and these functions are quite broad enough to cater for the issues that are envisaged by Section 210, insofar as it talks about investigations of complaints and also coming up with remedies for victims of conduct of security services. So it's not only about investigations, but also it goes as far as relating to remedies that the Commission can also offer. It also extends to the Commission also even inspecting facilities that are under control of security services. For instance, we're talking about detention centers. This Commission have got is given powers to even go and inspect, and also to even order security service officers to even give any information that it considers appropriate for an inquest to be conducted by any court or other investigating institutions in terms of the Coroner's Office Act, for instance. The coroner, for instance, this is an officer who deals with inquest where maybe we have a death in custody, where someone is in the custody of security services. So you can see the relationship that this commission then will be playing in terms of those processes that are already provided for in terms of the law. So to some extent, this act is trying to breathe some life to Section 210 of the Constitution. And finally, although it has been quite a long time from the Constitution, at least it's something that is positive that we can look forward to. Thank you very much for the question. In terms, when we are looking at complaints that will be presented by the election period, I can say we're already in the election period, so to speak, but the general elections are scheduled for 2023. I'm sure that the polling itself. Historically, Zimbabwean elections have been characterized by a lot of violence, by a lot of reports of abuse of human rights, attributed also to political players, as well as even also spreading to security service officers. They've not been left out in terms of the violations. The act comes at a rightful time, but the challenge that then comes in terms of guaranteeing issues that relates to the complaints that may arise in this forthcoming election is the issue of whether by then we would have already having a commission in place or having an institution already to deal with the issues, which I spoke to earlier on, where I'm saying, as a matter of urgency, Parliament then needs to look to start the process now of coming up with a commission, so that at least by the time the heightened tensions and issues that relate to the elections, like you mentioned, by the time we get to that, we should already have that commission already running around and already in place, so that it can actually then start to work and receive all complaints that come. That in any case, I need to emphasize that this commission would not necessarily be dealing with any complaint. This commission will be dealing with complaints that relates to conduct that is attributed to security service officers only. So any other complaints of human rights violations that the members of the public may have, they may utilize other commissions that are already in place. We have ZICC, Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. We already have Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission. If the complaints are of a gender nature, we already have the Zimbabwe Gender Commission. So those are some of the commissions that are already in place to do. So for this one, this specific commission will only deal with complaints that relates to misconduct that is ascribed to members of the security services. And like you rightly pointed out, historically we have heard reports of people dying in police custody, for instance, or people being abused by members of the Zimbabwe National Army, for instance. So complaints of that nature, if they come up during this forthcoming election, it would be my wish, or it would be even as Veritas would wish, would hope that by then at least Parliament would have made sure that this commission is in place. Because like I indicated earlier on, in terms of the Constitution, a constitutional obligation should be considered urgently. It's a matter of agency. It should be done diligently and within a reasonable time, and diligently and without any delay. And like we are saying, this is an issue that should have been done long back. So we are already way back in terms of having this commission in place. So it's our hope that the authorities that deals with this, like in this instance, the Parliament itself, the committee that I spoke about, should then quickly, as a matter of urgency, kickstart the process of appointment of this commission, so that by the time heightened tensions, or by the time we get into the full election mode and the full election gear, at least we will be having this institution to receive the complaints as and when they happen.